I reviewed the first Spyro about a year and a half ago, and I just don't remember it. I had to go back and rewatch my review because the game just didn't leave that much of a lasting impression on me.
The first Spyro felt like a collectathon. You traveled worlds, collected gems, and the occasional dragon egg while freeing dragons from crystallized prisons. I'm not complaining. A lot of 3D platform games generally have that game when they first start out. Banjo-Kazooie, Jak and Daxter. Collecting things was how you progressed through the game to get to the end of the goal, as game developers wanted you to explore the game's 3D world. The second game in the series is where it became defined on how it would work for the rest of its run. Of course, that's a generalization, especially when you look at what Spyro has become now. My history with Spyro is that I rented the first game when it first came out, and I didn't like it until many years later when I reviewed it, and I enjoyed it for what it was. The first Spyro was received and sold well, so a sequel was released 14 months later. On a side note, PlayStation 1 games were easy to develop for. That's why you'd see sequels around a year later, as it only took about 1 to 2 months to build a graphics engine for it, and according to Mark Cerny, a longtime developer who worked extensively with the PlayStation line of systems, has said that the PlayStation 4 was designed to be just as easy to develop for.
I'm hoping that, like the original PlayStation, we'll see quality games like Spyro or Crash be turned out at a constant rate on the PlayStation 4. I just hope there will be quality control this time around because the PlayStation 1 did have a lot of crap on it.
And to conclude this side note, I'm aware that there was an image of Crash Bandicoot unassigned in a PS4 commercial of some sort, and there's rumors going around that Sony might have bought the Crash Bandicoot intellectual property from Activision. I hope it's true, as I'd like to see Crash make a comeback, and Sony systems are his home. When it comes to development history on Spyro 2, there's really nothing I could find, which isn't uncommon for games back then that got sequels, as development history is really, it made a lot of money, let's make a new one. Games were simpler back then. They could pretty much reuse the same engine, character models, and even some of the same models they use for building levels. Once you have the assets built, you can save them and reuse them later. I'm not saying that Spyro 2 reuses everything from the first, but there is some architecture that looks reused from the first game. If it wasn't reused, it was at least definitely drawing inspiration from it. Spyro's animations are the same, but his face got a little bit of an update, and the textures in the overall game are better than the first.
And Spyro is voiced by Tom Kenny in his first ever video game role. And no, I'm not counting that Nickelodeon 3D movie maker because that's not a game.
Tom Kenny does a better job than Carlos Alazraqui, who sounded like Rocco from Rocco's Modern Life without the Australian accent, making him sound like a weak and pathetic character. Tom Kenny, who played Heifer from Rocco's Modern Life, sounds more like a heroic character. The sound quality is better in this game, and the music is very fantasy-oriented, which fits the overall theme of the game. The game is still of the action-adventure platform variety. Spyro can jump, glide, breathe fire, and ram into things, but they took away his rolling ability. Something I said was pointless to have in the first game, as Spyro didn't move very far to make it an effective dodge. And there was really nothing to dodge. Although in this game you could really have used it at times. And Spyro can finally swim. After the first game where water was either instant death or caused damage, you can finally swim, and not just on the surface, but you can dive underwater. And there's no time limit either. The only issue I have with the swimming is also the same issue I have with the camera when looking around, which is a matter of personal preference. The controls are inverse where up is down and down is up, and there's no option to change that.
While this Spyro isn't a collectathon like the last one, it kinda sorta is at the halfway point because then they require you to collect arbitrary stuff.
The first game had you going around freeing dragons to progress. In essence, you were collecting them, but the game was programmed in a way that you could skip certain areas if you met the requirements. I remember skipping some of the levels in World 4 and went right to World 5. In this game, you're required to get about 7 talismans to get to the boss. You can go through the first world with no issue, only needing to pay a character called Moneybags to open paths or give you abilities by paying gems. But when you get to the second world, you slam into a wall once you cleared 5 levels, which is about the halfway point of the game. You need to collect things called orbs, which you do by completing side missions for characters in the levels. And some of these side missions can be quite challenging, but the level of challenge varies and some aren't properly represented. The game can tell you a mission is 5 stars, the highest difficulty, but you can accomplish it with ease. But there could be another mission that's 1 star and it's the hardest thing you've done. This is a method of progression I just do not like. I don't like hitting a wall because I have to collect a bunch of objects that were implied to be optional but are now mandatory.
Optional missions? Fine. Optional collectibles? Fine. Optional missions where you have to collect optional items to progress through the game? It's official, 2 plus 2 equals fish.
I'm not complaining about needing to collect orbs to continue my progression. I'm complaining because I feel like I was lied to when that literal wall stops me from continuing the game. I didn't have this problem with Jak and Daxter or Banjo-Kazooie because collecting things was part of the adventure. In Spyro 2, you're given the objective at the beginning of the game, and it's pretty much get to the end of every level, which involves platforming and defeating enemies. I feel Spyro's gameplay is a little schizophrenic. At first I got to a hub world and I can explore and mess around with, then I go into a level with that classic Mario mindset of beat the level and go on to the next, as I was instructed by the game in the beginning. But now all of a sudden I'm pulling a Jak and Daxter by completing side missions to get the optional items that are required to progress. It feels like this was done purposely to pad the game out, otherwise it'd be something that you could complete in only a few hours because it's a short game, but it feels like unnecessary padding.
I don't mind exploring or doing side missions in a game as long as I can do it at my leisure, because that's kind of the point of that stuff. So this way a gamer has something to come back to for replayability, and forcing a player to do that diminishes its replayability.
Think of it this way. Crash Bandicoot has a goal of get to the end of the stage, but there's a lot of optional stuff to do. Breaking all the crates or exploring areas to find hidden things adds replayability, allowing the player to go back when they're done and see what they've missed, which gives the player the option to either make a beeline to the end or allow them to stop and smell the flowers. If you make the player who is more interested in beating the game stop and collect things that were implied to be optional, then you may piss them off. I've had people comment on how I tend to make a beeline towards the end of the game, not bothering to explore or just getting by with the minimum needed. And I've explained why, but I'll make that statement now for everyone. I tend to beat a game first, then I'll go back and look for the extra stuff to see what I missed. But only if it's a game that I really enjoyed and had a lot of fun with, or if I feel that the payoff for the effort is worth it. For example, getting all 7 Chaos Emeralds to use Supersonic, breeding a gold chocobo in Final Fantasy VII to get the Knights of the Round summon, or getting as many diamonds as you can to craft a full set of armor, weapons, and tools in Minecraft.
I prefer to have my bonus items add to my journey, or at least be useful to me in some way as I play. If I'm just going to get a gold star that does nothing, why should I bother? I'm not one of those people that needs bragging rights to make my e-penis feel bigger.
I don't play video games to hoard everything I can grab. I play video games for the adventure. That's why I wasn't mad about the Mass Effect 3 ending, because my journey there was incredible. Which brings me back to Spyro 2. I'm having fun with my journey, platforming, breathing fire, and gliding all about the levels, exploring for gems and other things that pique my interest as I find hidden areas and overall doing what I want. But now I have to collect these things that are now suddenly a requirement. My immersion is completely shattered as this unnecessary padding to increase the length of the game needs to be fulfilled to continue my progression. So I got the orbs needed to open the door to the remaining 2 levels and the boss. All I needed was 8 and I already had 5, so grabbing 3 more wasn't too much of a chore. I beat the boss and go on to the 3rd and final world. All throughout the game you're told that you need the 14 talismans to get to the main bad guy. So when you get to the final door you're told that you need 40 orbs to open it. If these things were so important, why wasn't there more emphasis put on collecting them? Well, there is, just not in the game. The instruction manual tells you to grab as many orbs as you can, but that's a huge jump from needing 8 to 40 of those. I find it to be unnecessary padding to extend the length of the game, which is about 4 hours as it is. And for a game like this, 4 hours is enough. I think it's a good length because it's simple and fun in this stop the bad guy story, which has characters that I would be happy to never see again, like Elora the Fawn and especially Hunter the Cheetah. I liked Moneybags, not as a character but as a mechanic to open doors and get new skills, and I rarely interacted with the professor. It's a game that's aged pretty well for the most part. I did have a lot of fun with it while exploring the levels on my own because there's quite a lot of hidden areas that you can find with lots of gems and extra lives. Some enemies require certain tactics to be defeated and the boss battles were fun and felt like boss battles. The only thing that put me off was that I had to collect way too many orbs to reach the final boss. And the orb collection feels like unneeded padding to the game's length, which should have been used for bonus items or a bonus setting for collecting them, not for story progression, especially when the characters place no importance on them. I'm sorry to keep coming back to that, but you have to understand, I was having a lot of fun with this game before all that orb collection BS.
Overall though, and despite the one thing that I found annoying, I enjoyed it and had fun with it for a majority of the duration, and it is better than its predecessor.